Well, some of the very early stuff a long time ago was recognizing that animals feel pain. The other thing that's very interesting, I did a trip to Israel. It was probably 20 years ago that I did it. And just about everybody who was, native Hebrew speaker, I asked them what the word dominion means in the Bible, where it says dominion over the animals. And just about everybody in Israel who was a fluent Hebrew speaker said it meant stewardship. That's a very different meaning. I must have asked 10 different people that question when I was in Israel a good number of years ago. We have stewardship over them. Now, both the Bible and the Quran have some humane guidelines. You don't yoke a donkey and an ox together, because the donkey is going to get dragged by the heavier ox. That's in the Bible. There's Islam, they talk about having to feed your animals. There was some concern even, back then.
And then at some point, like you said, there was people realized that they, animals, there's a realization that the animals, sense fear, and they feel pain, they have souls.
That's right. Well, if you look at the science, one of the big problems we have in science is people don't go across disciplines. Neuroscientists have known for decades that animals have fear. Now, I wrote one of the first papers in the journal Animal Science. It's called Assessment of Stress During Handling and Transport, where I got the fear word and some of that neuroscience research, brain research, into the animal science literature and the veterinary literature. Because for a long time, you couldn't say that. I had journal article reviewers back in the early 90s make me take out the word fear when I talked about cattle jumping around in a squeeze chute and change it to agitated. Well, nobody's making anybody do that today. It is completely recognized that animals have fear, that animals have emotional systems. It's very interesting how some of this work has evolved. Some of the earlier work was work of Jack Penskep, and he said that here's the basic 7 emotional systems that all mammals have: is fear, then you have anger. Okay, the bull comes after you on the pasture, that's probably not fear. Then you have separation distress, like when you take calves away from the mama and they're bawling, that's separation distress. Then you have seek, that's the urge to explore. There's been some very interesting research done with grazing cattle with GPS collars. And some animals will go out and seek and explore a whole lot of pasture, and others just lay around. There's genetic differences in exploration, in fearfulness, in separation distress, also sex drive, then the mother-young nurturing, the oxytocin system, and play. Now, some of the most recent literature that I've reviewed, they now are using the word personality. And what's happening on a lot of this research is different people are using different words that mean the same thing. So you can talk about a low fear or a high fear animal, or shy or a bold. Those are just, they mean the same thing. Or you can have a high seek and a low seek. And some of this newer literature is calling it a high exploration and a low exploration. They are the same trait. And both genetics and previous experiences affect the expression of these traits. And this is stuff that's very clear in the scientific research right now. Now, in the work that I've done, I started out working on livestock handling. And back in the 70s and 80s, livestock handling was atrocious. And in my very early work, I worked on better chute systems. Then in the 1980s, in the early 90s, I developed the center track restrainer system, which was an improvement over the V restrainer. And I want to make sure that the University of Connecticut researchers get credit for inventing the idea for the center track restrainer. And then I took their plywood model, which was light years away from anything that would work in a plant, and actually made it work out there in the plants. But I used to get very frustrated back in the early 90s. Had a lot of these systems out there. A lot of people just tore them up and wrecked them. They were not managing. Too often, people would just buy equipment and think it's automatic management. Now, we've learned that's stunning. You've got to maintain it. Then in 1999, I was hired to train the McDonald's food safety auditors on animal welfare. And I had previously developed what's now the NAMI guideline, before it was AMI guideline, for American Meat Institute guidelines, the measurement system, stunning efficacy, insensibility, vocalization scoring, prod scoring, falling down scoring, very objective measures. And we started scoring plants in 1999 and making them be fixed. And in 6 months, I saw more change than I'd seen in my whole entire career. And Wendy's and Burger King very quickly got on board. And most of the plants we were able to fix with simple fixes. Lots of non-slip flooring went in, lots of training. 3 plants had to have a managerectomy. Only 3 plants out of the 75 original McDonald's suppliers had to build expensive equipment. Everything else we fixed with maintenance, repairs, and training, and a lot of training and a lot of supervision. So things when it comes to handling and stunning, it's much better now than it was. 80s was about the worst conditions.
And going back even before that, and like in the days of Upton Sinclair's and the jungle, that a lot of public outcry was over worker safety then, but there was also there was a sense of awareness, at least maybe not acted on, but of the welfare of the animals at that time too. And that was, do you think that was maybe like possibly maybe the first hint of things to come? Maybe that people in the public were.
Well, the UK in England, they already had, stunning requirements way before we did. We passed the Humane Slaughter Act in 1958. That's before I got involved. But then in the 70s, in 1978, the Humane Slaughter Act was applied across all federally inspected plants, where prior to that, it was only plants sold to the federal government, like military bases and places like that. Things have come a long way. And one of the things that's made some of the biggest improvements was big buyers inspecting things. But it's really important to have real clear, simple guidelines about what passes and what fails. That's extremely important. Another very interesting thing I observed when I was